It was just past 2:30 a.m. But the embassy compound in Alcamra felt like it hadn't slept in days. The heat clung to everything. Thick with diesel, sweat, and nerves. Overhead, floodlights cast harsh beams that flickered every so often when the generators hiccuped. Inside the main operations tent, the air was suffocating. Radios squawked with fragmented intel, maps and satellite prints, covered folding tables, half-empty water bottles rolled underfoot. No one sat for long. Voices clashed in rapid bursts. One colonel pointed at the layout of the school compound, insisting the only way to breach was from the south wall. Another captain cut him off, shouting about IED placements and sniper nests. A third officer raised concerns about civilian casualties. No one was listening. They were too busy talking over each other. The clock on the wall ticked toward morning. Dawn would come soon. And with it, a promise broadcast hours earlier. Executions every 10 minutes if demands weren't met. At the edge of the tent, barely noticeable, amid the storm of movement, stood Captain Elise Morgan. Her flight suit was unzipped halfway, streaked with oil from an earlier maintenance check. Her helmet hung from her hand. She didn't pace. She didn't interrupt. She watched. Her eyes moved from map to monitor to the young lieutenant fumbling with coordinates at the far end of the table. Every detail registered. Every voice processed. But she stayed silent. No one asked her anything. She was a Black Hawk pilot assigned to logistics support, crate runs, fuel drops, medical evac. Maybe. Not combat planning. Someone brushed past her without looking. Another officer, the kind with ribbons stretching from collar to shoulder seam, tossed a glance in her direction, then dismissed it. She wasn't part of the conversation. She wasn't invited. They saw her uniform, her call sign patch, and made assumptions. Cargo pilot, utility crew, background noise. Outside, a short burst of automatic fire popped near the perimeter, just enough to make heads turn. A few guards shouted updates into comms, confirming no breach. Inside the tent, the tension only grew tighter. A major slammed his fist on the table, shouting about launching a ground team. A commander fired back that it would be suicide, that the hostages would be the first to die. Another officer threw out the idea of negotiating. Someone scoffed. Someone else cursed. No one had a clear plan. The hostage count was 200. The clock said 3:06 a.m. Emily didn't move. She just kept her eyes on the far wall, where someone had taped a recent drone image of the school. Her gaze lingered on a patch of concrete just north of the river. Rubble covered most of it, but she saw it differently. It wasn't just debris. It was a possible landing zone. Maybe tight, maybe risky, but not impossible. Still, she said nothing. Not yet. She was used to being overlooked. She had spent her entire career in the shadows of louder men with louder medals. But in that tent, under the weight of fear and failure, she could already see what they couldn't. The difference between chaos and control, between delay and action. She had flown through firefights before. She had touched down in dust storms that swallowed whole convoys. She had been dismissed by men who'd never stepped into the back of a bird under fire. And yet, she waited. Because the right moment hadn't come? Not yet. Elise Morgan wasn't raised around heroes. She grew up in a small, working-class town tucked into the edge of Montana's mountain shadow. Her father came home each night with grease on his hands and diesel in his clothes. He fixed engines. Big ones. Her mother waitressed double shifts and still made it home to cook dinner. They didn't talk about dreams. They talked about getting through the week. Even as a kid, Emily preferred machines to people. She could name every part of her dad's old pickup by the time she was 11. By 15, she was rebuilding lawnmower engines just to see if she could make them run better. She didn't talk much. She didn't need to. Her hands did the talking. After high school, she skipped college and walked straight into the recruiting office. She joined the army, not to chase glory, but because she wanted structure. skill, and something she could build with. They trained her as a Black Hawk mechanic. 60 seconds became her world. She worked in hangars long after others had clocked out. She learned to feel problems in the frame before the sensors ever caught them. Her crewmates joked she could hear a misaligned tail rotor in her sleep. No one expected her to apply to flight school. Mechanics stayed on the ground. That's how it worked. But Emily didn't follow what worked. She studied at night, memorized aerodynamics manuals, logged hours in the simulator every chance she got. When she finally made it through selection, she trained on the T6 Texan II, like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. She had no backup plan. Her wings didn't come with applause. She wasn't picked for flashy combat units. She flew supply runs, medical extractions, and fuel missions. She delivered what others needed, where they needed it, when they needed it. No headlines, no hero welcome. But if you wanted something done right and done quietly, you gave it to her. She didn't collect awards. She collected trust and flight hours, thousands of them. Each one earned the same way she earned everything else. The hard way. The command tent was louder than the firefights echoing beyond the blast walls. It was 3:40 a.m. and the temperature inside was closing in on 90 degrees. The hum of portable generators rattled against canvas walls. Sweat rolled down backs and dripped off chins. The air reeked of coffee gone stale. Printer toner. And men under stress. Radios hissed on every table. A drone feed flickered on a corner monitor, tracking movement around the school where 200 civilians sat trapped, bound and blindfolded. The enemy had turned a public building into a fortress. Colonel Albright leaned over the center table, jabbing his pen hard into the map. He wanted a ground breach. Come in from the west wall. Fast and loud. Captain Reed pushed back, arguing they'd lose half the team in the first 5 minutes. Lieutenant Colonel Mendez raised his voice, demanding more time for negotiation. Another voice shouted about rooftop snipers. Someone knocked over a water bottle, and no one bothered to pick it up. Orders turned to counter-orders. Tension mounted with every tick of the wall clock. At the edge of the room, Captain Emily Sorensen stood quietly, helmet in hand, flight suit damp with sweat and fuel. She studied the map, listened, measured, waited. Then, just loud enough to carry, she spoke. We could extract by air, drop an insertion team by fast rope, breach from above, then fly them and the hostages out. Use 60 seconds. Quiet approach. Minimal footprint. The room froze for a second. Then someone snorted. A younger captain across the table rolled his eyes. This from the cargo queen. A lieutenant near the radio laughed under his breath. What's next? She wants to lead the SEALs. And Emily didn't blink, didn't flinch. But inside, it landed hard. Colonel Albright didn't look up. He just waved her off like a buzzing fly. Stick to supply runs. Sorensen, this is real combat, not crate delivery. She didn't argue. No one did. Not for here. Even the SEALs in the corner didn't say a word. A few exchanged glances, but none spoke. Her suggestion hung in the air, ignored, then vanished beneath another round of shouting. Emily stepped back, let her gaze drift back to the map. There, a stretch of forgotten pavement near the river, half covered in rubble but not completely useless. A narrow corridor between buildings could form a low-level flight path. It wasn't standard, it wasn't safe, but it was possible, and she'd seen it before. In other cities, under other fires. She felt her throat tighten, then settle. This was familiar. Years ago, she had been in another tent, different country, semi-chaos. She'd watched her friend, Marcus, volunteer for a high-risk rescue in Kandahar. No one else stepped up. She hadn't either, and he never came back. That memory burned now behind her eyes. If no one else steps up, you do. The colonel kept barking, Others argued over breach routes and armor support. No one looked her way again. They'd already decided who she was. A pilot for boxes, fuel runs, quiet landings. She didn't correct them. But that piece of concrete near the river, she traced it in her mind again. No one else saw it. But she did. And she wasn't going to forget. The hours after her suggestion passed in a slow burn, the inside of the command tent grew hotter. Heavier. By 4:15 a.m., the air had stopped moving. Power units hummed louder. Radios clicked. Paused. Then crackled again with fragments of intercepted speech. Most of it garbled. Not enough to act on. Just enough to raise the pressure. Sweat-darkened collars. Maps curled at the corners from humidity. The men who had argued so forcefully earlier were quieter now. Some hunched over tablets. Some paced with jittery legs. One stared blankly at the same satellite image for half an hour. Eyes unfocused. The tension hadn't lifted. It had sunk in. Emily sat near the rear of the tent. Alone. She hadn't shifted in over 20 minutes. She didn't chew gum. Didn't tap her knee. Didn't fidget. Her hands were still. Her breathing even. The only movement came from her eyes. They scanned, measured, tracked details that others missed. A young lieutenant, red-faced from stress, stood at the whiteboard adjusting flight paths. His numbers didn't sit right. Emily rose, stepped beside him, and looked once. Then she spoke. Calm but clear. The wind wasn't out of the southeast. It had shifted. Gusts from the northeast at 20 knots. The correction needed to be 7 degrees, not 5. She handed him back the marker. Quiet. Certain. The change saved his planned route from clipping into the projected blast zone of a rooftop IED. He blinked, said nothing, but rewrote the vector. No one said thank you, but a few eyes turned toward her after that, not with admiration, with unease, the kind that comes when someone you thought you understood no longer fits the box you put them in. Minutes later, a shout rang from outside. Gunfire crackled near the north gate. A soldier sprinted across open gravel and dropped with a cry, hit in the thigh. The blast tent shifted as people ducked. Medics were too far. Voices scrambled over the comms. Emily didn't hesitate. She was up and out in seconds. Sprinting low. Dodging behind barriers. She reached the wounded soldier first. Applied pressure. Tore strips from her own undershirt. Pulled a cat tourniquet from his belt and locked it in place with practiced precision. Checked for a pulse. Stabilized his airway. Her hands moved like they'd done this more than once. The soldier's screams faded to gasps. Then steadied. His color began to return. A SEAL crouched nearby. Weapon drawn. He glanced at her. His fire stayed aimed forward, but his eyes lingered. Back inside, she returned without fanfare. Sat down again, helmet by her boot. A comm specialist slid a headset toward her. Static popped with rough Arabic. She leaned in and listened. Then, softly, she spoke 3 words in Pashto. The tech froze. Didn't expect her to understand, much less respond in language. She shrugged, said nothing more. Someone noticed the patch inside her flight bag. A worn scrap of cloth. Barely colored, but with a dagger and wings stitched across it, a symbol no one wore unless they'd earned it. No one asked. By 5 o'clock, her silence had shape. It filled the room, not loud, but steady, and heavier than anyone expected. It was 5:45 a.m. when Lieutenant Commander Isaac Ramirez stepped into the command tent. He moved like someone used to leading men into places they didn't expect to leave. Dust streaked his sleeves. His jaw was tight. He didn't waste words. He nodded once to Colonel Albright, took a breath, and listened as a staff officer rushed through a disjointed update. The tent still carried the same heat, same tension, same uncertainty. The latest plan on the table involved armored insertion with ground teams breaching in 3 waves. A few officers circled that idea like it might finally hold. Others paced with doubt in their eyes. No one looked convinced. As the lieutenant commander scanned the map, a young officer at the back muttered under his breath, trying to get a laugh. "Let cargo girl fly it. She loves hauling trash." The words slipped out like a joke meant for the few, but Ramirez heard it. He stopped. His gaze sharpened. He looked across the tent. "Who's cargo girl?" A pause. Then someone pointed at Emily, still sitting near the edge. "Calm as ever. That's Captain Sorensen. Call signs Raven." Ramirez blinked. Slowly, then straightened. "Raven." He looked at her. Really looked now. "You flew out 7 in Kandahar. Night up. Zero visibility. No air cover. You threaded that bird between 2 collapsing buildings. We had 30 seconds of life left. And then you dropped from the clouds like a damn ghost." The room fell silent. Even the radios seemed to hush. Colonel Albright leaned forward, trying to reconcile what he was hearing. Ramirez didn't wait. He stepped toward the center of the table and laid both hands on it. "If Raven says she can get in and get those people out, you don't second-guess her. You don't ask for a second opinion. You clear the sky and follow her lead." No one laughed now. No one moved. The captain who had mocked her looked down. The lieutenant's face had drained of color. Emily didn't react, didn't nod, didn't smirk. She remained where she was, still, watching. The same woman she had been before, only now. The air around her felt different. Respect doesn't always walk in shouting. Sometimes it waits. It watches, and when it arrives, it doesn't ask for space. It is given. From that moment forward, no one called her cargo girl again. It was 03:20 a.m. when the MH-60M Blackhawks lifted off the tarmac under blackout conditions. No cabin lights, no chatter, just the whirring hum of rotors slicing heavy desert air. The SEALs were already locked in, eyes hidden behind NVGs, weapons ready. Emily's bird led the formation. Her voice came through the headsets, calm and clipped, calling out headings, altitudes, wind shifts. No hesitation. They dropped to nap of the earth almost immediately, skimming just feet above rooftops as they threaded their way through the jagged skyline of Al-Qamra. Every window below could be a threat. Every alley, a launch point. They flew low and fast, blades nearly scraping satellite dishes, sweeping past abandoned towers and narrow apartment blocks still smoldering from last night's shelling, crossing the river at 03:26 a.m. The sky lit up. Enemy tracer fire cracked past the rotors. Then the flash bright, fast, violent. An RPG tore through the tail section of the second aircraft. The hit was direct. The tail rotor bucked. The bird started to spin. Emily didn't think. She dropped altitude fast, dove beneath the wounded helo. Using her own rotor wash to counter the descent, her voice came sharp through the net. "Easy into left pedal. Not too much. Watch your nose swing. Keep your torque steady." The other pilot responded, his voice shaking but focused. Emily matched his drift, flying inches under his tail, absorbing wake turbulence, guiding him with short, precise instructions. "You're good. Bring your nose up 2 degrees. You've got this. You're stable now." The wounded Blackhawk leveled, just enough. Emily's own warning lights began to scream. Her bird had taken shrapnel. Oil pressure dropped. The stick trembled in her hands. But she didn't flinch. She adjusted pitch, recalibrated her route on instinct. No time to analyze. No room for doubt. They cleared the riverbank, still under fire. Seconds stretched. Every breath was a calculation. Every choice was survival. The sky was chaos, but inside her cockpit, it was clear. She kept flying. Straight, low, locked in, because if she failed, no one got out. The last Blackhawk touched down inside the U.S. Embassy compound at 6:12 a.m. The sun had just cleared the horizon, casting long, golden streaks across the landing zone. Dust kicked up in waves as the rotors slowed. Then the ramp dropped. They came out fast. Hostages, wide-eyed and trembling. Some ran. Some stumbled. Some didn't make it past the edge of the ramp before falling to their knees. Medics rushed in with stretchers. Others helped people to their feet, arms wrapped around shoulders. Names were shouted. Head counts confirmed. 200. All of them. In the middle of the chaos, Emily stepped out of her aircraft. She moved slowly, helmet tucked under one arm. Her flight suit was streaked in dust and oil. Dried blood marked her sleeves where she'd wrapped someone's wound. Her eyes were clear, calm. The same steady walk she'd taken every day before this one. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look for anyone. Then Ramirez appeared. He came straight to her, boots crunching gravel. No words, no smile. He stood at attention and raised his hand in a crisp salute. It hung in the air for one long second. Then another soldier followed, and another, one by one, across the compound. Men and women stopped moving. They turned to face her, and they saluted. No one clapped. No one cheered. No one needed to. The silence that settled over the compound wasn't empty. It was full, heavy, the kind of silence that only comes when everyone understands what just happened. And who made it possible? Emily didn't blink. She nodded once, then walked off the line, disappearing into the morning haze. It was the loudest moment of her life, and no one said a word. Emily stepped away from the crowd. The compound had settled into organized chaos. Medics moved stretchers. Soldiers guided hostages to safe zones. Radios crackled with updates. But she didn't look for recognition. Reporters found her anyway, scribbling notes, asking who deserved the credit. She didn't hesitate. Teamwork. She said simply. She listed the SEALs who cleared the building, the crew chiefs who loaded the helicopters, the gunners who kept the corridors safe. She didn't mention how she had steadied a spinning Black Hawk or how she flew through enemy fire. No medals would capture that. Later, she found a quiet spot at the edge of the landing zone. An old ammo crate waited. She lowered herself onto it, gloves coming off. Her hands were calloused, coated in grit, stained from hours in the cockpit and on the tarmac. She rubbed her thumb over the faded tattoo on her wrist. Pilot wings above a dagger, a mark of a quiet unit whose deeds rarely left the shadows. She closed her eyes. Her mind traced every movement of the mission, the drops, the obstacles, the people who might not have made it without her. A whisper of a promise lingered in her memory, a vow kept for someone long gone, a friend who had never returned from Kandahar. She let herself breathe for the first time since the night began. No applause followed her, no ceremony. The sun climbed, warming the compound. The helicopters rested, the chaos receded, but Emily's peace was complete. The medal she carried wasn't in ribbons or commendations. It was quiet. It was memory. It was her own acknowledgement of what had been done right and what had been saved. This was her real medal. She held it alone, and that was enough. Courage does not always roar. Sometimes it moves quietly, almost unnoticed, through the spaces where no one is looking. Captain Emily Sorensen did not demand recognition. She did not seek applause. She acted because it had to be done, because lives depended on her calm, steady hands. The people we overlook, the ones dismissed as ordinary, often carry strength we cannot measure until the moment it matters most. Think about the world around you. Who do you dismiss? Who works without spotlight, without thanks, without expectation of reward? Would you have seen her, or would you have doubted her? Like so many did in that tense, sweltering command tent. True leadership is quiet. True heroism is humble. Respect is earned through action, not noise. And sometimes, the person who changes everything wears no medals, speaks softly, and leaves no trace of their presence, except the lives they have protected. Remember her story. And let it remind you that the extraordinary often lives in plain sight. Watch closely. Listen carefully. Step forward when others hesitate. Strength doesn't always announce itself, but it shapes the world anyway.